The Psychedelic Integration Coach and PsychedeLiA Psychedelic Experience Integration are a collective of professionals and peers interested in the potential psychological and spiritual healing properties of psychedelics. Our events are intended for the purpose of educating about mindful and safe integration of entheogenic experiences, offering emotional support, and creating meaningful connections between community members. Find more information at www.psychedelicintegrationcoach.com/events, and may you live that psychedelic feeling.
This is one of PsychedeLiA's Shamanic Practices workshops that we hold from time to time. And my name is Tara. I am a relatively new volunteer with the group. So I'm really happy to be here serving the community, and I'm really happy that you guys came. Daniel McQueen is our Executive Director of Medicinal Mindfulness. It's an international psychedelic therapy training program that's focused on cannabis-assisted psychedelic therapy and cannabis-assisted psychotherapy. When cannabis became legal in Colorado in 2015, Daniel began facilitating group psychedelic experiences using special blends of cannabis that introduce psychedelic states that mimic a blending of MDMA, psilocybin, Ayahuasca, and even DMT. These events, that are called Conscious Cannabis Circles, help develop the potential for cannabis to be used as a psychedelic within mindfulness-based, transpersonally aligned, and clinically informed protocol to treat trauma, PTSD, and other significant psychological concerns. As a somatically oriented psychedelic facilitator, Daniel is dedicated to exploring experiences that integrate the four primary paradigms of intentional medicine use: creative, scientific, psychological, and spiritual. PsychedeLiA actually also hosted Daniel a couple of years ago, so we're happy to have him back. And everyone, please welcome Daniel McQueen.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay? Is this working? I'd like to just say I'm grateful to be back in LA. This is my third trip here. It was about 3 years ago that we did that first talk, and I'm seeing some familiar faces and a lot of new faces. So thanks for showing up to this and meeting me on a Friday night. I'm here in LA for a psychedelic conference, and I want to use the opportunity to introduce our work again and share what we're up to. And I gotta have people show up for me to do that, so I'm really grateful. And I was thinking of the last trip we did here. So it included a couple of Conscious Cannabis Circles, so some small groups, and we did it in someone's private home. It was a really nice experience, and it's the first experience I had done outside of Colorado. You know, so Colorado became legal in 2014 recreationally, and I don't think it was recreationally legal here at that time when we did that 3 years ago. So we just did it because we could and wanted to share. You know, it was a little quiet, but it's about 12 people each night, and it was very LA. Like it was the first time I noticed a difference in the energy of a geography, for example. You know, and so like I'm used to working out of Boulder, and so it was like a nice surfer groove to the energy of the experience. And then at one point, we had some windows open, and there was some hip hop playing outside, you know, and all of a sudden I was like kind of grooving with it, listening to the hip hop. I'm like, I wonder how this has affected everybody's experience, you know. So I just sat with it, and then all of a sudden this little orb of energy came into one window, and it was playing the hip hop. I could literally hear it move across the room, and it popped right out the other window. And I was like, how do I explain this type of phenomenon to people? This is so bizarre. It was like a sound ball, you know, and made of musical notes. And so these are really magical experiences working with cannabis in that way. I'd like to thank PsychedeLiA and the communities here. LA is such a diverse psychedelic community. So I really want to acknowledge and honor that there's so many different voices and so many different empowered orientations here. That's something very unique, you know. So thank you again for showing up. I'm going to kind of give an update. You all 3 years ago were also the first group that was really more interested in psychedelic cannabis than the other things I was talking about. That was really the first time that had happened. So I've been doing psychedelic work full-time with cannabis for about 5 years now, so again, since 2014. And it's been a hard sell. A lot of people don't understand, like, oh, you can do this work with cannabis. Cannabis just gets you high. It's a recreational drug. It's like alcohol or whatever. And so it took a while for people to say, hey, wait a second. And it took me a while to really figure it out. So I'd like to share a little bit about that story tonight. So in some ways, it's an update from 3 years ago. And I'd also like to invite you all to ask questions. We're going to do a presentation, and then there'll be a Q&A at the end. But you don't have to wait if you want to ask a little bit more info about something that I'm speaking to.
Can you speak a little bit more into the mic?
Sure. Yeah. Is that better? No, maybe. Let's make sure that's good. Thanks for asking about that. So I'm just going to keep talking here. And is it even working?
Is there a switch in it? Did it switch off in the transfer?
Ew. Okay.
Oh, here we go. But maybe.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
I think it came loose. All right. Well, that's better. I can hear myself now. All right. Yeah. Is that too loud now? Are we okay? All right. So I'm here for the conference, and then I'm heading to San Francisco after this weekend, doing a talk at CIIS. It's like a live interview or something at that program, and doing a couple of circles in San Francisco. So a wonderful community up there as well. And I'm doing a circle here tomorrow night, not in this space. There are a few tickets left if anybody's interested in actually experiencing it. I don't have, I'll explain this a little bit more, but we actually can't do research on this legally, just the way the FDA and the DEA and laws around cannabis are. So I dropped all of that and decided to explore the edges of cannabis and its full potential, not what the government said we are supposed to do with it, right? So I don't have data in the same way, but I can say, hey, I understand that you're skeptical that cannabis can be used as a psychedelic, right? Me too, and why don't you come play with us and try it out, and so it's verifiable in that way, for sure. And I'll be back. We're playing around with the idea of a West Coast tour so I have two little girls, and they'll be 5 and 3 soon, and so renting one of those like America RV rentals, going up from San Diego to Vancouver, and like we're actually reaching these what do you say, critical masses, where we're able to start doing that now, and share this work in circles and in individual sessions and things. So that's super exciting. It's super exciting. We might even be able to go. Well, I have a student in Anchorage, so we might even go all the way up to Alaska, because the entire West Coast now, from South California to Alaska, is cannabis legal, including Canada, right? And just to be aware, so everybody, we're all interested, you had to agree to a statement that you're not going to share illegal substances here, right? And the laws, we do the same thing in our groups and the psychedelic societies in Colorado, right? Let's pay attention to that. We want to be safe, and cannabis is legal. It's we don't have to wait for it to be approved through the FDA, in the studies. I don't have to get a prescription from a medical doctor to work with the people. It's safe to use with other medications, right? And we can provide full, on a pretty regular basis, like ayahuasca level type experiences with it, and even beyond that. I know that sounds wild, and I'm still I'm still surprised by it sometimes, I first became aware of the possibility that cannabis could be used in this way. So I'm like everybody, I smoke pot, and I've been smoking pot for a while, right? And first time it was maybe a little over 20 years ago, right? And when we smoked pot, and it might be a little different California, but there was just pot, right? There was just weed. There was no such thing as kind bud, kind bud started coming in, and that's what we have now. It's what we all smoke now, is what was considered really nice medicine then. And you know, so the terpene profiles, there was no such thing as terpene profiles, right? And the THC levels were much lower than they are now, right? And so on average, you know, compared to 20 years ago, the cannabis is 3 times stronger. And it is also doesn't have the same CBD content in it, which reduces the effects of the THC. But most importantly is the terpene profiles, and I'll talk about this, that make these possible. So what we do is we combine, I have a strain right here I'd like to maybe pass around, or a blend. We combined strains to make the terpene profile even more diverse. And so, do you know, I'm assuming most of you know the difference between like indicas and sativas and hybrids, right? So indicas can be sedating, right? But they're also very body awakening. Sativas can be elevating and creative, but they can also be anxiety provoking. And so the weird magic in combining these strains is that the positive aspects of the plant remain and the negative aspects are canceled out. So the sedation, the heaviness of an indica is canceled out by the anxiety of the sativa and vice versa. And so what you have is a super elevated state that's very body aware, without the anxiety or paranoia that sometimes is associated with extreme levels of cannabis use, right? Or edibles and things, right? So who has tripped on cannabis? It's like, you know, it's been usually an edible maybe, you know, more often than not it's an edible. And like the last time I tripped on cannabis on an edible, you know, like I took about half of what I thought was a dose and it was probably twice what a dose was. And I went through these like moments, like I would have these panic attacks. It was purely physiological, just panic attacks. And then I would breathe through it and then I'd start laughing hysterically because like I should have known better. Like this, I do this professionally. So professionally, right? And I'd laugh and then I'd go into another panic attack and I'd laugh about it. And it took hours. It was hours, right? So this is what most people associate with psychedelic level cannabis. It's not fun, right? Or you vomit, you know, or think you're having a heart attack. There's a lot, you know, a lot of people call 911 in Colorado when they take too much pot because they think they're having a heart attack or dying. And so they'll vomit, have panic attacks, and then trip for 5 hours. That's not fun. Like if that's what you think cannabis, psychedelic cannabis is, then why would you do that, right? But with the strains that we're working with, we're able to adjust it to amplify the positive effects and just clear out the negative, right? So you're able to increase your intake and not have the negative aspects associated with it, panic and such. And so I didn't think I realized what I was getting into when we got started. You know, I really had no idea. And I first became aware of really the power of cannabis at Naropa when I was going to school there. I decided to do, I wanted to take some of these classes and I had to do an extra assignment because they didn't fit the criteria of graduation or something. And so I said I wanted to do a meditation with a yoga component. And I didn't tell the teacher this, but I would smoke herb before I would do it. And there was a practice I did pretty regularly for a little while. And I would stretch, I would smoke, I would stretch. I would do some intuitive stretching, you know, just follow some threads and things. And then I would lay down in Savasana. And I was tripping. I was seeing color. I was seeing energy moving through my bodies. And I was having, you know, deep transformational experiences with this. But I still didn't get the idea of what cannabis had the potential for. I kind of let that go after the assignments were over. But then a friend of mine, a couple of months before it became legal, he said, hey, have you ever considered working with cannabis, like your interest in other medicines? And I was set to be a psychedelic guide. I was going to be an underground practitioner. I was getting my training. I was getting educated to do this work ethically. I was going to be a therapist and work as an underground guide. And so I had some experience doing that. And he said, have you ever considered working with cannabis like these other medicines? And I was like, no, I hadn't. Why? You know? And he's like, well, you know it's a psychedelic, right? I was like, yeah, I did know that. Why have we never considered that? And I've realized now that a lot of us have this kind of, it's not rational. It's a misunderstanding of the medicine. And I think it might have something to do with prohibition and war on drugs and a lot of misunderstanding of the medicine. And also that most of us who are a little older, you couldn't do this with that medicine, right? So like within the last 20 years, it literally evolved. This plant has evolved in a way that makes this possible. So he helped me set up some of our first circles, and I just started experimenting. I didn't know, like I just made the blend. I didn't really think about it. I just intuitively followed some threads, you know, and started to explore that. You know, it made sense to me. But the idea of blending like this is not that commonly known, you know, to play with this stuff, right, in that way. So we did our first circles. We have a wonderful yoga studio that we work out of that can hold maybe about 30 people, about 20 in a circle. And so we work, it's a beautiful hexagon shaped room with the stage. We now do the work with live music. We have a band that plays the music for us, crystal bowls in the middle of the room, and you know, like all kinds of electronic equipment. But the very first ones, and I play music for these, and a friend of mine said, you know, everybody was coming back, and one friend said, you know, when that music was played, that part where it was the crescendo, my soul was smeared across the universe. And I was like, really? Cool, you know, like, you know, he was pretty shaken by the experience. I'm like, yeah, right on, man. So that was the first clue. And then another friend said, you know, Daniel, and this is somebody I know really well, she said, if I didn't know you and trust you, I would have sworn you put DMT in that. And I was like, really? Whoa, you know, this is great, you know. So it was like a pretty obvious, we have to look at this, right? We have to consider this, we have to explore this. So the other thread that I was following, you know, so I'm trained as an MDMA assisted psychotherapist, and I'm trauma informed, you know, and so started thinking after a while doing this, like how well can we use it as a psychedelic? Okay, it can be a psychedelic trip, right? But how well can we use it? What can we do with this medicine? So we started working with it clinically. You know, I started working one-on-one with people. And I do 5-hour sessions, so this is what I do. This is my day job. I do a couple of sessions, 2-3 sessions a week. I consider that about full-time, and I write the rest of the time and, you know, organize my company and do the events and trainings, you know, but this is my day job. People fly in for a couple of days session, 2 5-hour sessions, and I provide a psychedelic trip with cannabis for specific intentions. And I would say the group split between 2 types of people coming. One, they're curious, or they're medicine people, and they're like want to develop a relationship, a different kind of relationship with cannabis. Or they've never done medicine before, you know, so especially since Michael Pollan's book has come out, getting a lot of inquiries. People have never done anything like this before. So it's a really wonderful trip for new people who've never done something like this, and then also experienced people get a lot out of it. I can talk more about that if you'd like. And so there's the explorers that we play with, we work with, and then there's people that are coming for real serious clinical concerns, and specifically trauma related, I would say. Cannabis is a powerful medicine. There was a recent study that came out, people who are using medically, a third are using for mood disorders, so depression, anxiety, and PTSD, right? A third are using it for pain management. It's a wonderful healing tool for that and provides a lot of relief. And then about 15% are using it for sleep, you know, so people are using it. They already know that they can use it for these purposes, right? But what we're like, well, how can we maximize the effects of it? How can we potentiate that? How can we develop that further? So I practice a form of mindfulness meditation with my clients that's guided and therapeutic, and it's obviously a plant medicine, but as a psychotherapist or guide, oftentimes I can't distinguish it from MDMA work, you know, like what's going on, what the person is experiencing. They might be shaking, trembling, you know, releasing trauma somatically, you know, their arms and legs, and they might be having, you know, really strong memory recall from difficult experiences to help with that, like recall, consolidation of the memory that MDMA people talk about, right? But the benefit is they don't have that methy side effect or withdrawal or the come down afterwards, right? So it's a little stabler in some ways for people with severe trauma. I don't have to do like suicide evaluations every day for the week after, right? It's a stable medicine. People generally, like, so oftentimes after a psychedelic or MDMA, people don't sleep as well because they're still kind of wired from the experience. Whereas with cannabis, they sleep better than they have in years after these journeys, you know. And then we get to do it again. We get to do it again the next day. So if you were to do MDMA or other work, you know, like they don't recommend you do MDMA 2 days in a row or weekly for a while, right? That's that can tax the nervous system and the brain. So it's a really powerful medicine. So I dropped everything. I dropped being the idea of being an underground guide. I dropped that whole identity. I realized I wouldn't be speaking here if I were an underground guide. And there was a part of me that just can't shut up about this, you know. So it didn't work for me to it's like keep a secret. Like, can you keep a secret? I can't keep a secret. We're doing something really special here. Why the hell would we want to keep this a secret, right? It's very special. I wish there were, like, I have this internal debate how much I would share with about the experiences that I have with people. And what I was thinking about is, like, I don't feel comfortable, to be honest, sharing a lot more than just general things that have happened. People are going through really profound healing, and it's very personal. You know, it's being a guide in this way is sitting with people, sharing sometimes the most difficult memories they've ever had. And there's a huge range of that in our society, what that can look like. You know, but so I'll share more about my own experiences in this work. And I don't identify as a psychotherapist. I personally find that label extremely limiting, you know. And my first interest in psychedelics was spiritual, you know, and exploration in nature. So I really identify as a guide in that way. Just like I think of like I tell people, look, I'm on the boat with you. We're going on an adventure together. I'm not some voice up here floating over you. Like, what happens to you happens to me because I'm on the boat with you. You know, like, we're going out and we're going to do some big work, you know, to help whatever it is you're working on. And I will be right there with you. And as a guide, I take the medicine too. And not everybody does that. So my wife works as a cannabis-assisted psychotherapist, and she doesn't imbibe with her clients. But I do. And there's a lot of traditions that, you know, are really honoring of that. And I rest in that space. And I'm very lucid in that space, right? But that's not something I recommend people start doing when they're working with cannabis, you know, like, because it's easy to, like, lose your ground and fall into these spaces. But whatever is happening in the space with the person is happening in me as well. There's like a mirroring effect that happens, and I am on the journey as well. And what I've wondered is like, wow, did I really need that much healing? You know, like maybe so. Maybe humans can really carry a lot, and maybe this medicine can be something that we can go back to again and again and again in a very safe way, neurologically safe way, emotionally safe, physiologically safe way, but still deeply meaningful, you know? Does that make sense? You know? Yeah. I tell people I have the best job on the planet, and it's the hardest and the most meaningful job I've ever done, you know? You know, I sit with people. I used to joke that I smoke pot for a living, which is very true. You know, and that's okay. I'm like accepting of that and honoring of it, and I treat it with respect. But I imbibe pretty regularly, you know, and that's okay, right? Like it is a useful tool for getting through the day. And the paradox is it doesn't interfere, using regularly doesn't interfere with these big experiences. Like we're taught, oh, you have a high tolerance, it's not as effective anymore. It's actually not true at all in these experiences. I work with people who are really heavy smokers and they're still tripping out. You know. Yeah, you have a question?
Yeah, so just to be clear, so everything you're talking about, like the bowl music light that came in and the like similarities to MDMA, that's purely through only exogenous input is cannabis?
That's right. Yeah, no, I had full visual hallucinations, and I'm sitting up, you know, so let's talk about that. All right, here we go. Like, so this, I'll talk about this at some point. You know, there's some really great info on this. But I was planning on talking about all of these things anyway. So let's talk about the spirit of this plant and the spirit of this medicine. I don't know then like how it affects, how it works, like chemically speaking, why it does this. It's not the same as like these, you know, these tryptamines and other things that have these specific neurological reasons that people trip. What I suspect is that, you know, it's an adaptogen, right? And it brings homeostasis to our system. It provides us whatever we need in any moment, right? Whatever you need, there's a strain for that. What other medicine can say that, right? That right there is amazing. And so if you say, hey, I need a psychedelic, she says, okay, let me show you, you know, like here's a possibility for you. So it's an adaptogen. It brings us back to homeostasis, but it can also disrupt our homeostasis like a psychedelic can. And so the question is, maybe our our advanced thriving space is very psychedelic in nature, just our natural state. People who've never done a psychedelic have profound psychedelic trips, but people who have had psychedelic experiences before often describe it as other medicines they've taken. So more often than not, people who have had ayahuasca say that was just like ayahuasca. I know that sounds strange, and I recognize that. I'll talk about the differences too. But that's a really common experience. People who've taken a lot of psilocybin, it was just like psilocybin. I've had experiences that were completely indistinguishable and as trippy as LSD, like full LSD trips. I've had experiences that were full-blown DMT trips. I've had and I've witnessed experiences on cannabis that were 5-MeO DMT, just like it. I've had experiences and I've seen experiences that were just like peyote experiences, completely indistinguishable from like the awakened, you know, the frontal cortex awakened space and hallucinating, you know, like literally seeing things in the room. So what the hell is going on here, right? Like, how possible is this? What's really going on? And I don't know, actually. And the other thing is, it's I really don't. And if anybody says they do, they really don't know. They really don't know, you know. And it's also very much like MDMA, and so hybrids, you know, like the third leg of cannabis or sativa, indica, there's hybrids. Hybrids aren't really in between the two. They're more like a third leg, and third leg is very heart opening. So hybrids are very here, and so certain strains, certain blends can be like just like MDMA, but again, it won't be like that like crystalline, like trippy experience, right? It'll be more earth-based than MDMA. It'll be more plant, a vibe of a plant medicine than MDMA. The primary difference, and so as a harm reduction tool and an opportunity to, I'm making sure, can everybody see me with the, I'm trying to find a good spot where everybody can see me kind of wandering around a little bit. As a harm reduction tool, you can assess people for their readiness to take other medicines with this. And sometimes it's a really great first step. Like I get a call, it's like, I've never done ayahuasca or never done anything before, I'm going to Peru. Or I want to go to Peru, or I'm thinking about going to Peru, that scares the shit out of me, what do I do? It's like, come try cannabis, you know, like it's a good first step. And at the same time, people are having like people who know, people who, and I've heard this, I don't know how many times now, who have had real big psychedelic trips. I've heard this, wow, that was the most intense psychedelic trip I've ever had. I'm like, really? You know, like, I'm still so surprised by it. Every day, every time I do it with people, I'm like, wow, I can't believe that happened. Like, really, that's amazing. Yeah, you had a question?
At the ceremonies, what's the people smoking it or eating it?
Yeah, that's a really important question. So the question is, do you smoke it, do you eat it? So how about I introduce you to the medicine? And I have a request. So this is a sacred plant to me. This is a sacred little jar I'm going to pass around. And so I'd like to really ask you to be mindful of how you pass it. And I'm going to pass it with the jar lid open so you can smell it. This is pure flower, no concentrates, no hash, no oils, it's just the flower. And again though, the flower nowadays can be 20 to 30% THC with these incredible terpene profiles. Cannabis, so think about this, cannabis is a psychedelic flower. That's what it is. And we are imbibing the nectar of a psychedelic flower to have a psychedelic trip. So it's really unique in that way. You know, there are other flowers that are like, you know, that are psychedelic, but not like this, right? And so it's the nectar. And so as a plant medicine, it's very feminine, right? And it's a shapeshifter. So it's also a little bit of a trickster, right? Totally a trickster. Like, look at America. But it shapeshifts, and it can shift into other medicines. And it's associated with the mother spirit, and the great mother, the earth mother. And so as dispensary people and people who are growing, like, how do you treat the feminine? It shows up in how the gardens are grown, you know? And so they can be honored and really valued and treated with respect, or they can be totally commercialized and covered in poison and mass produced, you know, and used like other things we use in this world, you know. So this is a ceremonially intended batch blend. There's 9 strains in it. And there is a secret process that I tell all my psychedelic sitter school students. I'll talk a little bit about like the strains, but it's about a third hybrid indica sativa. That's your basic recipe, all right? And if you want to do 2 sativas, 2 indicas, 2 hybrids, you do that. You're 3. I've done them I've had as many as 18 strains. And not all blends are the same, are equal. You know, you really can work the medicine and get to know it in that way. And it's like a relationship with the plant that is evolving, right? So like the strain that I have here is not the strain I made 6 months ago. Because the plants are just not available. They're evolved. We're literally witnessing the evolution of a species with the help of breeding and cultivation. You know, it's like a, what do they call that? Like a symbiotic relationship. You know, it's like the plants are using us to evolve. You know, it's like flip it upside down. We're not using these plants. They want to play in our brains. You know. You had a question over there?
Yeah, have you worked with patients that have been naturally high resistance to all medications, and does it work for them?
I've never had that problem. So we do honor and support like the use of this medicine in whatever way that somebody chooses to use it. I've decided, I worked with a lot of people who smoke pot, and as a clinician, I trust that the person who's using the medicine knows exactly what they're doing and why. And my job with working with this plant medicine is to just show them, hey, have you ever considered working with it this way? Have you ever considered working with it this way? You know, like here are the symptoms that you're working with. Let me show you some skill sets that you can incorporate in that use that supports that healing. And one of the things we recommend is fasting. We call them medicine fast. And you know, when you take an LSD every week, you know, maybe you should take a medicine fast, right? Like it's a harm reduction strategy of supporting someone. It's not saying, hey, you really shouldn't do this. We make it a special event, you know, like an intentional spiritual practice. And it can be as short as a couple of days, or it can be a week. Some people do a monthly fast, and then breaking the fast, they come back to the circle to imbibe if they've been away for a little while and not smoking. And so that can help if somebody has a high tolerance. But I've had, what happens is, so unlike other medicines, I call it subjective dosing. And everybody's different. We all metabolize it differently. So you just keep smoking until you reach the level that you want to be at. And I trust that the person can do that, right? And they do, you know. The other question that I wanted to bring up is why we don't work with edibles. One, I've never really felt the need to. But two, it's like if I had a group of 20 people and we gave them each an edible, there would be 20 different responses in the room. And from, I'm not feeling anything, you're a fraud, to, holy shit, I'm going to die and I'm vomiting all over the floor, you know, and like, I don't want to deal with that as a practitioner. We are in the process of developing tinctures. And so the problem with the tinctures so far is that the extraction processes do something to the terpenes. And ingesting, it does different things, but there aren't really, like, there's nothing like flower. And so there are people who are using vaporizers with oils and things, and it's just not the same experience. It's not going to be as clean, you know? Yeah, you have another question?
Have you ever tried using the terpenes of other plants, like for example lavender?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and there's some debate around that, you know, like, so like there's a whole idea of you can hack the plant, hack the cannabis plant, you know, by adding terpenes. So terpenes in cannabis are what make it smell differently, right? And so lavender, linalool is a terpene in lavender, but it's also in cannabis, and as you can imagine, that's a relaxing and a sedating terpene, right? So maybe something in Blue Dream or something more on the indica side, right? Limonene would be like lemons, you know, and that might be elevating or like uplifting or even anxiety provoking, right? And so you can actually, these terpenes come in other plants, and you can add them to the THC to alter the effects of the cannabinoids. There's a huge debate. I'm open to it, you know, but we've never really needed to add extra terpenes to the blends that we use. And then edibles are a completely different beast, and I just haven't found as much of a like elevated state, like a lot of edibles, because they're going through your liver, they can just feel a little heavier, right? No matter what, and we haven't perfected that one yet. compared to what I know I can do with the cannabis, with the flower. So we offer vaporizers as well as pipes. You know, I work with people who've never smoked pot before. So I'm teaching people how to use as we go, which is like the cutest thing in the world. Let me show you how to use the vaporizer. I give a little instructional, you know, or here's the carb on the pipe. You have to put your thumb on it, you know. It's really sweet, you know, and people are very excited, you know, to use in this way. Yeah, and maybe one more question, and then we'll maybe shift to something over here. Yeah.
Just a quick question. So I grew up in a part of California where there's a lot of pot and always has been, and I grew up around a lot of people who had difficult relationships with weed, where they couldn't
Sure.
stop smoking it, and it had a very like, addictive quality.
Sure.
And I'm just wondering if you have a comment on that, because it's clearly so powerful in this medicinal way,
Yeah.
and yet it also causes people so much pain,
Yeah.
and they have trouble with it.
Yeah, yeah. That's a really complicated question, and so there's even a recent study came out that if you use if you're a lot higher THC strains are now like there's a correlation between that and like people having their use in first psychotic episodes, you know, but it doesn't show causation at all, right? And so maybe somebody's predisposed. I'm also wondering if like the psychosis might be a lack of integration. Because this is just pot, but they're actually not just high, they're tripping, and they're tripping all the time, and so like lack of integration might be a factor there. And so with like a peak hopping type experience with pot as well. Also, people are trying to address trauma with cannabis, and it's a good, well, I'll talk about Sue Sisley's study in a little bit, but trauma, or cannabis as trauma symptom suppression, right? And so if you're in that space, it's not necessarily just addiction, it's this person has some trauma and they're using, and so it's actually the trauma, not the medicine that needs to be addressed. So like, how do you help trauma, right? Like get them into therapy and that sort of thing. And so what we found, it's not a cure-all, because I think with people who have addiction, you know, they need to do some real work around that. But what we found is that when we teach people how to use with intention, or they start coming to the circles and breath work, I teach breath work classes too, they start reducing their use without even having conversations. So it's a harm reduction strategy as much as anything. And I don't have to shame them, right? Like, or say cannabis is bad. One thing I say that like a good reason not to smoke pot every day is that you can have better dreams. That's about like as far as I go with like, let's look at this, you know, it's like, and like, would you like to go into the realm of dreams for a little while? You know, like, how about take a week off and start writing your dreams down? You know, so again, you're making your, like, it's all positive no matter what. And then in that space, when there's non-judgment, when you have to say something hard, there's at least a chance that there's more receptivity to it, but not always, right? So, you know, mental illness is it's a big deal, you know, and people really struggle. So let's go ahead and switch the. So this is just a video that I did. This video for my Psychedelic Sitter School program as like a prerequisite before people come train with us at the retreat. But I thought, holy shit, this is actually a really good intro and overview, and I'm just going to use it to talk about a few things. So we've been doing this for 5 years, and I finally came up with a name for it. So the word cannabis assisted is new. So everybody's heard of MDMA assisted or psilocybin assisted psychotherapy, psychedelic psychotherapy, psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. These are like common terms in our community, but there's actually no references. I haven't done an exhaustive like review of the lit and all of that, but I have read all the books that are like Cannabis and Spirituality, the pot book, the big pot book that came. These are books that came out of the psychedelic community, and they don't use the term cannabis assisted once. So this is actually a new thing, you know. So we're calling what I do cannabis-assisted psychedelic therapy, because it's not clear when you say cannabis-assisted psychotherapy that they're actually having a real psychedelic experience, right? So I'm trying to be as explicit as I can about that. And so, you know, so that's where we're at. Like I've also considered calling it psychedelic cannabis therapy, you know, so we're playing with these things, yeah, Ashley.
Using the word therapy, there's kind of ties in question I also had is, are you and your wife a therapist? And
Yeah, so let's talk about that.
And because using the word therapy, at least in California, you have to be a licensed therapist.
So it's in Colorado, the term is psychotherapy, which you can't use, like that's the more specific. So therapy is a little broader in Colorado. And so I'm really hard at conforming to things, and which is typical in our community, right? Like we're kind of like rebels and exploring edges and breaking the rules to see what happens, you know. And I'm supportive of like safe boundaries and like ethics and all of this stuff, but we have had to like really explore some changing our understanding of ethics because we were taught wrong in a lot of ways in our society, right? So it's not about skirting ethics. For me, it's more about like I couldn't conform to the psychotherapy ethics, primarily because very basically I'm giving a Schedule 1 substance to a client and I'm smoking with them. That is not technically psychotherapy, right? Like that is not in that realm. That would not be okay, right? Like even though it is, right? Like from their perspective, like the grievance board is not going to understand that, right? So I identify, I believe personally that psychedelic therapy is its own thing. And there are people that are using the term psychedelic therapist as their own, as a different thing that is inclusive of psychotherapy, but you don't have to just be a psychotherapist to do it. So like physical therapy, psychotherapy, spiritual guidance work, right? You can do yoga, right, and all of this. So I use the term therapy because of the healing component, right? Like there is a natural healing component, and it's short. The CAPT. Like I think of it as the captain. You know, so we have maps and we have ships. You know, it's like maybe we can have some captains too, and that's what cannabis is all about, is agency. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's the primary difference, is you never feel like you completely lost control, and it provides agency. So this is what I'm working with right now, and then cannabis-assisted psychotherapy is a subset of what I do. So it's a shorter session, it's more psycholytic. It might be very MDMA-like, but it's not like tripping out, right? You know, so there's a few clinics. There's one in Oakland and one, or a practitioner, and a couple around me. And I've been training practitioners in this. So we're literally creating a new professional identity, and that's really what I'm living into, is not being defined by psychotherapy, but acknowledging it, you know, as part of it. I also have all the training as a psychotherapist, the master's level psychotherapist, and I went through and got all the supervision and all the hours, and I did everything but the test. And I sat there for a long time. It was a little while ago, and maybe now, 2019, I would recommend that you get your license and you become a psychotherapist to do this work. But my path is more of a community organizer and a trainer and working the community energy, and that's very different than psychotherapy. So I personally dropped it. Yeah.
Can I ask, like, so the flower, you were saying, you know, it's a mixture of third, hybrid, third. Like, how did you decide which strains to mix? Like, what metrics did you use?
Yeah. So I'm non-scientific. Sometimes I use a pendulum. Sometimes I listen to it and sit with it and talk to it. I'll smoke it and meditate with it. And then, so when I first got started, I would combine this strain with this one and sit with it. And I combine these two different strains and sit with it. There's a lot of research and development that came into this. I smoke pot for a living, right? Like, this is what I do. I make, I sit in my meditation space and light candles and get my strains out, and I have a beautiful mortar and pestle, and I'll sit and pray with it and mix it with intention, and then mix it with the old batch so that there's a spiritual lineage with the medicine. It's very not psychotherapy, the way I work, and this is how I work, and I'm fine with that, right? But that's not for everybody. I'm super explicit about my orientation on my website. I have disclosure statements like, this is what you're going to get into if you work with me, So I said there's like pick three strains. What I would recommend at that level is find one that smells right to you, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's good. It smells good. Some of them can be really funky, but there's some attraction. So let your nose decide the strains, but you can start experimenting with it and getting to know. And I have a particular dispensary I go to, so I know their medicine really well. And sometimes I tweak it after I make it. Like, oh, this is a little on the sativa side, so I'll add something to it. So very, very intuitive. And I have a friend, an ally, a business partner, who is like exploring AI algorithms and terpene profiles, and he wants to put it all into an AI program and like mimic what I've created with these blends. And I'm like, okay, that sounds really cool, but I don't know if it's going to work, But he swears it's going to work, And then I have another partner who's like, who's doing EEG scans with different strains, and so they're going to be putting EEG scans into the algorithm, and I'm like, that sounds cool, but I don't know. Like, that's so far beyond my pendulum. It's like I trust my inner guidance going to come out in my pendulum, So I'm very different, like I've been this way my whole life, a lot of medicine people, we're a little different, and we come into this work out of extreme curiosity. We can't help ourselves, or we come into it out of an extreme need, and or both. Oftentimes it's both, and so I fit that. I'm part of the population that I work with for sure, So I'm a little off and weird, but I really like myself sometimes. Yeah, let's do a couple more questions, and then how are we doing on time? Like, what are we?
50 minutes.
We're at 50 minutes?
Yeah. So you want to do 30 minutes, 20 Q&A?
All right, so we're doing Q&A and stuff. Do y'all like the way this is going? I don't know if I'm going to get to anything on this. So can we pause the questions for a second, and then we'll. So the other program I just want to name is that. So smoking pot's my day job, and I love it. It's like the same thing over and over again, but every time it's completely different. So like it keeps me grounded. It's my day work, right? But every day it's unique. Every time I work with somebody, I see patterns now. I've done it enough to see the patterns, but each person, the story, the light that flows through the space is really amazing, but it's become my day job. It's what I do for a living. And so I started to ask the question, what if I weren't so focused on healing trauma or healing my own trauma, what would I do? What really inspires me? What would be the highest possibility that I could live into? And it turned out to be the hardest too, but and that's the extended state DMT program. So I work with this medicine in this way with cannabis to all these practices and skill sets and set it up a certain way, and I can make cannabis a psychedelic. What would happen if I did that with a psychedelic? Right? Wait a second, what would really happen there? And there's extended state DMT. I won't go into it tonight, but I have some great videos online on our Psychedelic Shine YouTube page and stuff if you're interested in that. But the idea is, so the way DMT works is you have an experience, you smoke it, 5-7 minutes later you're back, or you're coming down, you're not in the peak state. What this would be is combining certain medical equipment, certain what's the word? Pharmacokinetic models, you know, of like absorption rates in the body and all of this, and a specific medical device. So the idea is you plug someone in, you program it, and you push a button, and they can go they go different stages, different depths, and they can stay in it for extended periods of time, and then if there's a crisis or if they're ready to come out or it's completion, you push another button and they come down 5 minutes. And so I'm just really fascinated by this. And DMT is totally illegal. And so we're looking at religious freedom models, like similar to ayahuasca, but we might be found a place in another country that we're able to do this work. And so maybe by 2020 or 2021 we'll be doing our first extended state expeditions, you know. And it's appropriate, and we should be legalizing these medicines and all of this, but I don't want to be defined by that, by having to heal, right? What do we focus on? The creative, the positive. So that's what I did. I explored, like, what is the highest potential of these medicines? And I did it with cannabis, and I still don't know. I honestly don't know the potential of this medicine still. I haven't reached it yet. And then with DMT, what is a real, like, what do I want to do? It's like, what would I be interested in? And that's what came out of that. So, and I have a team of like 20 people working on this. It's the weirdest thing. Like, it's drawing people from all over the world. People are super excited about it. It's really fun, you know. I made patches. I made astronaut patches. Here, I'll pass this around. These are like, if you want to give a donation, I'll give you a patch. This will pay for a future extended state DMT expedition. So, like, think of astronaut. I got one right here. Think of astronaut patch. I wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid. I couldn't afford a rocket, so I smoked DMT. Because I was curious. I couldn't help it, right? It's this funny thing that we do. Let's go to another slide. I think there's just a few maybe at the beginning. Oh, this is, I don't know if this is, so there's new training programs coming out that I'd just like to, state that there's the CIAS program, which is like really amazing, and then there's MAPS is doing the MDMA psychotherapy training program now, and there's ketamine training institutes and other things. So we're doing the same thing with cannabis, and so we work with non-therapists as much as therapists, and it's incremental. You can learn to sit for people and it'd be super safe, and then you can learn to sit and guide, go deeper in the process. And then you can learn to work with clinical issues and concerns. You just learn to assess where you're at and the people you work with, and it's very safe. And so it's a 5-day program. We're finally doing it at a retreat center this year. We finally found a retreat space that would let us smoke in their facility. So this is brand new. Like, California has kind of stepped ahead of Colorado in some ways, because you can have yoga studios that are cannabis friendly and stuff. We can't really do that in Colorado. So, and then the other thing that was really great, Psychedelic First Aid Cpr. I didn't realize this, but I wanted to do this, and there isn't any CPR, Psychedelic First Aid programs in the world. So I'm hoping people will be inspired to explore what it looks like to handle crisis and to work with people in crisis. And then it's like a wilderness first responders training. So you actually get the credentials. So like, what if you're out in the woods with somebody and they fall and hit their head, and y'all are both tripping? What if somebody looks like they're having a stroke or a heart attack? What do you really do in a situation like that? And I've never had to deal. I've seen overdoses before, but I got an email from the Boulder Dance Coalition a couple of years ago. Somebody had a heart attack dancing, and they had a protocol for that. Like, we should be really thinking about these things. If you're a guide and working with people, do you have medical equipment and know how to use it? So go ahead and go ahead and go to another one. This is just some dates.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, go back. Yeah, so June's full, the psychedelic guide training. May is getting close to full. September is our next sitter school. And it's at a beautiful retreat south of Denver. It's on a 500-acre camp. And in September, there's going to be new cabins built, so we even have more space for people. But we're, you know, so our goal is to train as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, right? And because we are living through some crazy shit right now, and we need trauma healing yesterday, right, on a large scale. And so that's kind of like my mission is to train. So like we're capping the first one at 30, but like maybe in the future in 2020 we'll have even more people at these, and it's all experiential, it's all psychedelic journey work and how to do it. You're going to be sitting for people and being guided by people. And then we have live music. It's going to be like these whole events, you know. So we have 2 nights of live music. One is a gong bath cannabis ceremony, and then our breathwork band is coming for Saturday night, and we do a big ceremony. And you know, you'd get to test this, like how deep can I go with this medicine, you know? First night you might be a little nervous so you don't smoke as much, but by the Saturday night you're like, let's do it, you know? Let's see how far we can go.
When people go through the training, if there's different levels, they need to go to 3, or if they're maybe a therapist or a teacher.
Right. No, that's a really good question. So they build on each other. So I'm not just, so I let go of teaching like basic therapeutic techniques and things. So it's a specific modality that I'm teaching, and a specific way to sit and a specific way to guide. So they build on each other. And I've worked with therapists who are like underground therapists, you know, who got a lot out of the program. So I think of being a guide as like it's like a martial arts style. There's all kinds of different martial arts, you know, like we can have like a complex identity as guide, and there's going to be different styles and competitions of which style is better than the other and all of this stuff, you know, so let's have those conversations. But I let go of like generalized harm reduction and all of that. It's like I'm just going to teach these specific mindfulness practices that are therapeutic, and how to sit, how to hold space as a guide, you know. What can you get out of the experience, you know? You're not just sitting there, right? Like we're all in the same boat as the people, you know. So go ahead and do, so I just like, we're living in a major global paradigm shift, and I don't know how else to explain it. If you're not around, you know, you can't see it like, okay, like, and then like, I keep adding to this list as, you know, since I've started this, and President Trump is at the bottom, you know. Like Trump is like a trauma-inducing machine, you know. He's causing so much trauma all over the country and border and children and all of this stuff, you know. And so like the idea is like we need mechanisms to counter it and to heal trauma on a large scale too. And to me, that's what psychedelics, or cannabis specifically, thank you, but what psychedelics are good for. I don't know if there's much else, like, yeah.
How do we know when trauma is actually healed and not just sort of,
Yeah.
someone has experienced and released a lot, but how do we actually know when something is healed?
That's a really wonderful question. And what I would say is that it, particularly working with cannabis and all the psychedelics really, but is that it heals in stages. And instead of like working from a modality or a paradigm or orientation maybe of not healed and healed, is that what if you stepped into just an ongoing path of healing? And because symptoms just continue to get better in comparison, you just feel better. And you feel lighter. You have more space around emotions, and they're not as triggering, or you don't feel as much pain and tension in your body as you did. And I call it, like, working with cannabis and working with psychedelics, I think it's like a psychedelic flossing. You know, something you want to go back to. It's not something like, I did this and then I'm done, right? But I would say the number one thing that I see with people is they quit thinking about their trauma. They quit, like, they're not oriented towards it, like it's central to their lives. The orientation is no longer there, and they start to reorient to things that really matter to them. What do I want to do with my life? What kind of job do I want to have? How do I want to live in relationship with other people? And do I want to travel? it's like that's a really big theme. Like people are like, they finally like are pulled, like they're pulled out of their trauma. It's like, I want to get out of here and go see the world, you know. And so like they'll go off for a year and come back and, you know, visit, you know. So I see that pretty regularly. So I would say let go of like the polarity of heal versus not healed, or but there is a space where it's just not as an issue anymore, you know. So that's how you know the symptoms aren't there. You can always go back into a trauma response, but then you'll have more skill sets in dealing with it, right, and handling it, and you're able to move through it quicker. And it just becomes like something that you know to be part of your life, and you accept it and love it, and that itself transforms it even more, you know. So let's go. There's a beautiful picture of a heart. There it is. I had this commissioned. So we've talked a lot about this stuff, but let's go ahead and go back to just the heart. I don't know if we really need to. So if you want, I can share the video of this conversation with you all. I have a link, so if you want to email me, or we can figure something out of like what's actually on here. But this was what I really wanted to talk about. I'd like to just close, and we'll go into more questions. So I identify as a medicine person. I use psychedelic substances as part of my spiritual practice, and they're really core to my being. So like to say I can't do something like this would be like stripping something that really mattered to me, and that's not how I would like to live, you know. And I'm not really interested in like conforming, right? So like I'm really happy with my psychedelic identity. And there are a lot of wonderful people in the world that identify as medicine people, and maybe a lot of us in this room would too. And so like I play with culture, and I play with like identify, like what if we were like a culture, what would be some of the things we say to people, you know? How would we greet each other, you know? And so I was coming to California, I was walking to the bus station. My girls, I just dropped the girls off and was taking some luggage to the bus station, and walked by someone, and I was a little nervous, you know, about coming out here, and got a lot going on, and a lot going on in life. It's the longest I've been away from my family since my kids were born. And this person looked at me and said, and she saw all this baggage, and she looked at me and said, "Safe travels." And I just looked at her and smiled, and because that's what I say to people, you know, when you know, you're going on a medicine journey, safe travels. Have fun, safe travels. You know, it's like it's an ancient greeting to wish someone well on a trip, you know. So it was such a confirmation, you know. It's like, I can relax into this experience. I can have a good time in California. It's like if I don't get a message like this, nobody says that like out randomly in the world, you know. You know, so I would like to invite you to play with that. Like, what would it be like to wish people a safe journey, you know, as a goodbye, or something other than a goodbye, you know, until we meet again, right? So safe travels, everyone. And if you're interested in the journey tomorrow, come play with us. I'll be back here next year at the latest to chat with you again and let you know what we've been up to. So thank you very much for coming with us. So I think we just check here. Yeah, maybe we have some time for some questions. We don't need to talk much longer, but I do want to create a space for questions. Yeah.
I have a question. So you mentioned that you kind of mix them based on your own intuition, but I was wondering if you work with any specific dispensaries, and if they have any analytical profiles that give you a sense of the potencies, and it seems like more and more drugs like becoming more potent.
Yeah. I've looked at terpene profiles, you know, and it's like I don't like. It doesn't compute to my brain. And this is where the AI program really comes in. Like it's really complicated data. you know, it's not just, it's like, and sometimes these terpene profiles will have 20 to 30 terpenes in them, and or these cannabis strains. Do it by smell, so you can smell different terpenes, and that seems to be a major factor. Like I said, I've been working with the same dispensary for several years now, so I really know their medicine and how they grow it. So in the THC probably would be something I would be paying attention to, and you want to try to find all your strains to be at least over 20%. And if you can get the average over 25%, it's even better. But if you can't, and I mean, this is California, right? You should be able to find some pretty good herb. You just smoke more, you know. You get some really good, clean medicine, and you just smoke more. I can feel, because I've been smoking organic cannabis for so long now. Like if somebody gives me something and it has a contaminant in it, or you know, something nasty, it'll stop me up, and I can feel it. I don't like it, and so really organic, high quality. If you can find one grown with intention, those are the things I would be looking for, and what smells right to you. Yeah.
Have you ever used extracts, like smokable extracts, cannabis?
Yeah.
For that purpose?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You know, I've tried dabs and other things. I felt like there was just too much cannabis or too much THC in these, and it seemed to almost interfere with the psychedelic state. And so it's not about like full, heavy, just pure THC doses. But we've tried it with hemp. We've tried it with all kinds of things, or not hemp, but hash. We do work with hemp strains too with breath work. So that's the other thing. No CBD in your strains or in your blend is a good way, because CBD is a natural anti-psychedelic. And speaking of CBD, so I'm a harm reduction guy. This is Nano Encapsulated Cbd. Nano Encapsulated means it's absorbed in your through your membranes and doesn't go through your liver. You know, so you know, just a couple of squirts, and within a minute or two, you'll feel it, the effects of it. Somebody's having a panic attack or something like this, or hyperventilating. If they smoked, what's that? Is
that hemp derived or full spectrum?
This is hemp derived, but there are some full spectrum versions coming on the market. I don't have any sort of financial relationship with these companies, so I'm not recommending a particular product. But Nano Encapsulated Cbd, it can help panic attacks with cannabis. So if somebody's really struggling or really uncomfortable in their body, hey, would you like to try some CBD? You don't have to stay in that state. And the other cool thing is it might be really useful for other psychedelics. Like somebody's having a crisis with other psychedelics. Everybody in here should be keeping this in your little pouch, you know, that you carry. So cannabis, so here's another magical cure thing about cannabis, is that the antidote to the medicine is in the medicine. So you can't say that for any other psychedelic. Hey, you're having a really hard LSD trip? Here, you should take some more LSD. Right? Like, you just can't do that. Oh, you're having a hard mushroom trip? Here, let me give you some more mushrooms. You know, maybe, I guess, with peyote they say that, right? But it's not an antidote. You're not going to come down. I will say one more thing about that. It does reduce your blood pressure, lower your blood pressure. So if you're already prone to blood pressure, low blood pressure, just make sure you're not going to faint when you stand up after you take it. All right. In the back over here. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Daniel.
Yeah.
I'm curious, especially because of what you're speaking to for your practices for selecting strains and building relationships with these strains. In some of the plant spirit medicine traditions that I've explored with herbalism, I've met practitioners who have claimed to form such a relationship with a certain herb or a certain medicine that they can actually, in a meditative state, without taking it as a tea or in any sort of extract, just kind of call upon it as an ally and sort of access.
Sure.
And I'm curious if you've played with that at all, if you've kind of built, if you have any strain allies that you can kind of call on even if you're not imbibing. Maybe not you personally, but if you have experience. Yeah,
that's a good question. I feel like I'm tripping all the time. So I might not be the best person for that. I'm fine with it. So yeah, the channel's really open, and like, so what I'm thinking is, like, even the medicine I buy with my clients, I'm sitting up, I'm lucid, but I'm still in these psychedelic, really strong psychedelic trips, and I'm not smoking that much on, maybe a lot less than my clients. So the idea that tolerance, like, is being, like, my experience is questioning that assumption around tolerance, because we're adding a particular context and setting, But yeah, I've sat with the medicine. I've sat with the live plant. I'll sit with the live plant. One time, a friend of mine who was growing, accidentally grew a male plant, and so he gifted it to me instead of tossing it. And I sat with that plant for weeks. It was great, and sat, just, it had a lot to say about how we were treating the female plants. So, I mean, these are shamanic practices, I guess, and you can even use terms like creative, imaginal, right, active imagination, but you can still gain a lot of really important information if the plant's not really talking to you. The part of ourselves that can answer those questions is showing up in that way. Back in the back.
I try a lot of different blends for my health, and sometimes in very large quantities. And I've tried your recommendation of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, and I've never had anything resembling a psychedelic experience. What would you recommend as a next step for a patient like that?
You're a pretty regular smoker. You use large doses.
Regularly, I have an unusual condition that makes me very non-vulnerable to any kind of medication, whether it's Novocaine, alcohol, or cannabis.
So I would increase the dose more, so your dose is your dose, and it's very safe. But I would lay in a comfortable position where you don't have to hold up your body. Would be my first recommendation. And I teach this stuff. These are like practices that I teach. So the first one is what we call gentle stillness. So you take as much as you can, whatever you feel is appropriate for you. You're the judge of that. You can always sit up and smoke more if you're just not getting there. But once you lay down, again, you can set up pillows under your knees, around your arms, on a bed, and a recliner. Get in a space where you don't have to hold yourself up at all. There's something about cannabis works as with gentle stillness, and this is one of the main differences between it and other psychedelics, is that you have to choose to go deeper into it over and over again. Whereas if you take LSD, you're on the trip, right? If you sit up or you're on mushrooms, or it's like, say you smoke DMT and you sit up, you're going to be still really tripping on DMT, right? Like, there's no question about that. With cannabis, you sit up and you're still really high, but you get to take a break from the trip. So one of the things we found is that a gentle stillness is really important to that process. If you move a lot, it'll shut the process down repeatedly. But if you start twitching or moving or jerking, you let that happen. It's a very healing experience. And this is based on somatic experiencing and other somatic psychotherapies. The other thing you're going to want to do is focus on your breath. Breathe into the belly. And if you want to amplify the process, you breathe stronger in your belly. And it can look like, I like to breathe in my nose and out my mouth, and it can be, we want it to be a little circular, all right? And it's a real gentle, easy practice, and it's more like a lift off. You don't have to stay with it. This is a real psychedelic trip. You don't have to stay with the experiences or the breath to stay in the trip. It's like breath work, you have to keep with the breath, right? So circular, and you can intensify your breathing, but it can still be gentle, and that should help.
Do you ever use like meditative trance states to achieve that kind of gentle stillness?
Yeah, so our primary practice, meditation practice, is the body scan meditation. It's just a gentle meditation practice, and I recommend to my students that they mostly do it without smoking pot, but then doing it with pot on occasion. So, so I guide, and then with these circles, the first thing I do after we smoke is I guide people through a meditation. And it helps, it helps that entry point, And if you, come to the groups, there's something about the group process that can accelerate it for you.
What time is the group tomorrow, and how much does it cost?
7 to 11, is that right? Yeah. It's $99, and there's a scholarship that's $77. And so we let people decide what, they can do. And, and the journey itself is 2.5 to 3 hours long. We'll be in there you'll be laying on your back, prone for about 3 hours. There'll be a break in the middle, so you can use the restroom and smoke some more if you want. This is not like an endurance test like peyote ceremonies are and stuff. We want you to be comfortable. So you want to bring your own pillows. We have yoga mats, I think, but you're going to want to bring your own pipes or vaporizers. I have this cannabis to share, but you can bring your own. And I would just if you're not feeling it, I'd be like, here, let me repack your bowl. Here you go. All right. You want some more? If you let's give you the experience you're looking for. First 5 minutes, you'll most 90% of the issues around anxiety or paranoia, agitation, panic, things like that. One, I can work with that, but two, it happens in the first 5 minutes. So after that, you can go pretty deep and know you'll be safe and not overdo it. If you overdo it, what happens is it's real flashy. It's really fast, and it's you can have 1,000 images a minute show up, and that's just I think that's your neurons being rewired or something. And so when that happens, you just rest, relax in it, and witness it, breathe with it. There's something very healing about it. So that's generally what happens if you kind of overdo it. You had a question over here?
Yeah, that experience you had with the orb, have you had any other experiences like that?
Oh yeah, man. We hear knocking on the walls. Candles will explode or flame up. I'll be sitting in the space and look over at a sitter and look back down and look back over and realize that wasn't a sitter sitting there and they're not there anymore. I see people shadows, sharing space with us all the time.
How do you explain this?
Well, I saw that DMT thing. I can't, so I'm curious and I wonder about it. And it feels we've had these experiences. They feel, Dr. Strassman talks about it feeling more real than real, right? So it's really hard to ignore that you see somebody over there and then they're not there anymore, or just as something happens really significant in the room, the whole speaker system blows out and does something really funky. It shows up in the speaker systems a lot. So that's why we really try to have good equipment, because it does weird things to the speakers. See light. We see light. Sometimes it looks like a haze of white light over everything. Sometimes you can see the light coming out of people's eyes when they come out. People's faces are structurally different before and after the cannabis circles. They look different. Usually about 10 years younger. So it's good for your... Yeah. Yeah, I'm 154. Didn't grow my hair back. I'm really bummed about that. Maybe a couple more questions, and then we'll create some space to have a community. I don't know, hang out. Yeah.
One information and then a question. So I was in mass clinical trial for MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. I was one of the original subjects back in 2005.
That's great.
Yeah.
You worked with Annie and Michael?
Yeah, they're my therapists. And I've been in durable remission and then relapsed, and now I'm in durable remission from an accidental blood dose of cannabis, which has blown my mind completely because it was on par with...
You mean it helped you? The cannabis helped you into a more of a remission space?
And, because I couldn't go back into the study, etc.
Yeah, right.
And I was looking for answers and feeling like, wow, I'm in it because everything out.
Yeah.
And it was an accident that I blood dosed, and that's what put me back into remission. So
that's great news.
Right, and I've been running around like a zealot. Our integration team is 6 out of 8 of us are here.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I've been running around.
That's awesome.
We got to explore this, we got to explore this. So I'm really, really grateful you're
here. But my question is, you were talking about the laying down and meditating, relaxation, and so I've been working ever since then with mindful, intentional, therapeutic breakthrough, but it's almost always been extreme athleticism or dancing, almost like non-ordinary states that I was getting into without any medicine, and then I added the medicine now, and it's like
with cannabis added cannabis to it? Oh, absolutely. Oh my God, yes. It's amazing.
A super indica kind of, and I can still just launch. And so it's extremely active for me, and but it's therapeutic, transformational, hallucination, everything. But I'm not mellow. And what do you think?
You're not mellow.
No.
What do you
I'm
mean by
laying
that?
down, and I'm
yeah, no, it is. Yeah, keep dancing. So what I teach and what I do with the medicine, it seems to be like one small possibility of thousands that we can do with this medicine. And so like that's your medicine, and dance and movement is your medicine. So remember I told you when I first got started with cannabis, I would stretch and move and be intentional, and then I'd lay down. So I would say add the savasana after your movement practice and see what that does. And that's an incredible space. Like in yoga, they say savasana is the most important pose, right? And so cannabis and yoga evolved together, right? So maybe there's a relationship between the savasana pose and cannabis. So try that after the movement, but don't stop the movement. It's great. Yeah, so not everybody has that capacity to be sitting up and tripping on cannabis, but it's a key. Cannabis is a catalyst. So if you've had other psychedelic experiences, it can launch you right back into them. And this is what we're finding is that cannabis therapy as conjunction to MDMA therapy to continue the healing looks like it's going to be like like if I had a clinic, when we're looking at all of these things and creating clinics and all of this stuff too, but like if I didn't have to deal with the FDA and all of that, the protocol would include cannabis sessions maybe first even, and then an MDMA session, and then several cannabis sessions, and then even longer than the 3 to 4 to 6 weeks, another MDMA session, and that's when because trauma is not just in the nervous system, which is what MDMA really addresses. It's in the fascia and in our tissue, and that's what cannabis addresses. Cannabis is we play with this term, somatic psychedelic. It's like it relaxes the tensions in the muscles, the connections between our muscles and our bones. So it's super deep relaxation in the body, and so it reduces inflammation, and which is tension and trauma. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So I strongly recommend for the other people who are working with trauma, and have gone through the study, incorporate cannabis and mindfulness practices into your healing. Yeah.
Question about tomorrow. We are coming out to play with you. And
great. So
the question is, your magic strain, how are we ingesting that?
Bring a pipe, or bring a. You saw how ground it was, so it doesn't make the best joints, but we can roll you a joint too. So if you have a favorite pipe or flower vape, bring that. So I normally have, I carry a little box with 30 pipes with me and stuff for these, but I'm not going on the airplane with all of that. So we have to ask you to bring some of it. I have eye coverings. You're going to want a pillow. You might want a blanket, a water bottle, and I think we have yoga mats, but bring extra. What's that? Oh, you have to rent the yoga mats? They didn't mention that. The bolsters are included? All right. We have bolsters. I don't know. So I've never worked at this space, but we've got these techno cool people over here helping me. Yeah. It's a community effort to put these on. They're fun. We already have 32 people signed up for it. Space for 40, and maybe a little more. But I don't try to pack people in. So this is a big group. This is a good sized group. This is about as big as we can get in Boulder.
Okay, and have you done groups this size in Boulder?
Yeah.
And is everyone, hallucinating? Is everyone
I mean, vast majority for sure. It's more common than not, like for sure. Yeah, and okay, so what I tell people, if you are bored or sleepy, sit up and smoke more. It's not that it's not working, it's that you didn't get enough. So it's a subjective dosing. It's really, because and you're going to feel it within a few minutes, so you'll know. Yeah. Yeah, and the first 5 minutes we'll know if you're okay. And then I've got I got 3 bottles of that stuff here with me, so I brought extra. So if there is a big experience, we know how to work with it. So yeah, maybe we will probably one more. Can we do one more?
Just one more short one.
Oh, all right. Ashley.
Just to take you back on the question I had before, is your wife licensed?
My wife is licensed.
Okay.
Yes.
And then how does she work with that?
All right. Yeah, these are really, really great questions, and there's no precedence for this, and we're also going to be working with a medical cannabis psychiatrist who might prescribe it for PTSD, and then we work with that. So that's one way we're looking at protecting the clinical therapist. But the goal is to have a product that we can recommend at a store, and we're in the process of doing that. But right now, the cannabis is provided by our community, by someone else in our community. The person goes and picks up a little vial of it. It's a gram and a half. That's all they need for several sessions. So we're not talking about huge doses. And then they bring it to therapy with them, and then they smoke it there, or vape it in that situation because it's in an office. Yeah. And I smoke with my clients, or they vape and I smoke, and I don't have a license, and like I thought we would show up if we got grieved over this stuff. We would just show up and say, well, this is what we do. Here's the science. We'll do our best to represent, but if she lost her license, we would state this is how she lost her license. And I think anybody who loses their license in our community should be stating how they lost their license, because that happens in our community. So that's part of our activism, But in 5 years, I've never had an issue. I'll just say that. And I know, like extend the time frame out long enough. Of course, there's going to be things, but it seems to be incredibly safe to be a practitioner with this, especially in places like California and Colorado, probably the whole West Coast. I have students that are practicing all over the country and in Canada right now. So none of us have ever had a problem. So yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, and I'm around.